Welcome back. Well, the Grain Belt Express, being built by American power company Invenergy, is a proposed line connecting Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. It's supposed to provide 5,000 megawatts of energy to customers. But Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey says the GBE might not be beneficial to Missourians after all. I spoke with the CEO of Invenergy here, Michael Polsky, last week on this program about the project. Watch.
I just want to make sure the total project cost will be about $11 billion. This is just this particular contracts for $1.7 billion. So this is a huge investment.
Huge.
Create 22,000 jobs along the way between transmission and generation. So this is the major, I would say this is the largest electricity infrastructure project right now in the United States.
And why are you doing this now?
Because I think clearly what President said in his executive order, that it's basically energy emergency, electricity emergency. We need electricity, and we need electricity now.
All right, let's get into it. The president has all hands on deck when it comes to energy and his plans for tapping into America's capacity. Joining me now is Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey. AG, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What is the issue around this Invenergy plan?
Well, this is a ripoff for all Missourians, and it has been since day one. When this project was announced in 2014, it was sold as a way to create renewable energy sources to fulfill the Green New Deal. Now the corporate executive is attempting to rebrand the project as somehow aligned with the president's goal of unleashing energy. But look, the CEO's lies are starting to catch up with them. None of the promises they made to regulators or the public here in the state of Missouri have been fulfilled, and they don't have the electrons to push through the power lines. Moreover, to the extent we need these new transmission lines, why aren't they being built over existing footprints rather than harming Missouri agriculture, which is the foundation of our economy here in the state of Missouri?
So you're saying the infrastructure is already in place, just work with that?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, why did they sell a bill of goods to the state regulators who approved the project initially? In other words, they made certain representations about the funding levels that they had already acquired, the number of jobs they would be able to provide, and the ease of being able to get these projects to completion. And yet they've had to file 40 lawsuits against family farmers in northern Missouri to take their property away from them. That's a sign of system failure. And again, none of these promises has come true. So either they were fraudulent in the inducement of the permits to proceed with the project, or the evidence that they presented was so speculative, the regulators should have never relied on it to approve the project in the first place.
So do you have others who are with you on this in terms of the other states involved? Do you need scale to stop this?
Certainly scale would help, but at the end of the day, my job is to protect Missourians from this kind of fraudulent business transaction and protect, again, one of the foundational elements of our economy, which is Missouri agriculture. And this all started back in 2005 when the Supreme Court wrongly decided Kelo v. City of New London, and what Justice Thomas predicted would happen is exactly what's happening, boots on the ground in the state of Missouri. When the Supreme Court eliminated any restriction on corporate eminent domain, it turned into a reverse Robin Hood, where wealthy foreign corporations like Invenergy can steal property from small farmers. And we're not going to let that happen here in Missouri.
Well, what do you want to see from President Trump and his plans for energy? Because last week he came out with a new executive order reforming nuclear reactor testing at the Department of Energy. He's talked about all hands on deck, not just oil, but gas, natural gas, nuclear, everything, given the fact that the demand for electricity and energy is soaring, particularly in this new age of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a need for new power generation, and I completely support the president's plan to unleash American energy through all necessary means. But I would point out that Grain Belt is not aligned with that. Number one, this is a company that promotes its DEI programs and is funded by a Canadian investment corporation. So that's not unleashing American energy. That's lining the pockets of Canadian retirees. But I would also point out that Invenergy is committed to eliminating fossil fuel energy in the United States of America. Again, this is contrary to the president's plan. We need to be drilling more oil, mining more coal, firing up new plants, not building transmission lines where we don't have the electrons to push through them.
Well, let me switch gears, ask you what else you're working on right now, AG. There are so many issues out there in terms of pushback to President Trump's agenda. You've got judges out there trying to stop his immigration plans. You've also got this unbelievable situation in the former president, Joe Biden's White House, where there was a complete cover-up of his mental capacity and other issues that are around him. We've got this new book out here by Thompson and Tapper, who basically says aides said he only has to show proof of life once in a while, and then the aides will pick up the slack. Unbelievable. Who was in charge of the auto pen? Are you investigating this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a fraud of constitutional proportion. It's clear that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, did not have the mental faculties to be running the country or executing legal documents. We pointed that out in correspondence with the DOJ, asking them to review any documents that were put in front of the president and who was doing that. Look, this is a standard procedure that happens in probate courts across the United States of America where you can contest the validity of those documents. I would submit that I question whether any pardons were issued at all, because if the president himself did not know what he was doing and signed those documents personally, then they're not legally valid and should be rescinded and revoked.
And that's what Ed Martin is working on right now, who's running the weaponization board at the DOJ. All right, let me switch gears to get your take on the FBI. FBI Director Kash Patel told me that he's going to be reassigning nearly 36 agents to Missouri over the rise in violent crime. I spoke with the FBI director on Sunday Morning Futures 2 weeks ago. Watch this.
In the National Capital Region, in the 50-mile radius around Washington, D.C., there were 11,000 FBI employees. That's like a third of the workforce. A third of the crime doesn't happen here. So we're taking 1,500 of those folks and moving them out. Every state's getting a plus up. And I think when we do things like that, we inspire folks in America to become intel analysts and agents and say, we want to go work at the FBI because we want to go fight violent crime and we want to get sent out into the country to do it. And that's what we're doing. In the next 3, 6, 9 months, we're going to do that hard.
AJ, your reaction?
I applaud Director Patel and Deputy Director Bongino. I applaud General Bondi and President Trump for making these selections. This is reprioritizing making America safe again. Let's have more cops on the streets, good guys with guns, stop bad guys with guns. This is an enormous win for public safety. How
are you doing there in Missouri? Of course, the state is recovering from the tornado supercell that hit the state last week. Governor Mike Kehoe requesting President Trump and FEMA approve a major disaster declaration. 5 people were killed, over $1.6 billion in damages. The president approved aid for Missouri back in March following more devastating storms in the state. And now this, AG, you've recently issued a warning to scammers following this storm. What's going on?
Well, my heart goes out to all those Missourians, especially in the St. Louis area, who have lost loved ones, lost property. At the end of the day, we need to protect those people and wrap our arms around them and make sure they have the resources they need to rebuild and reconstitute their lives. And we can't have them being ripped off by predatory price gougers. And so it's important that as the consumer protection watchdog for the state of Missouri, we provide resources to the St. Louis region and to all Missourians to ensure that in this time of need, they're not being ripped off. We have consumer protection investigators standing by to investigate claims of fraud, abuse, and price gouging, and certainly would commend those to the people of the city of St. Louis. I know the governor has directed resources to the St. Louis region and has been in close coordination with the mayor's office there to ensure that the folks in St. Louis get what they need to rebuild and start to recover.
All right, we will leave it there. AG, we will be keeping you in our prayers and all of the Missourians you refer to. Good to see you this morning. Thank you, sir.